everyone. Happy Wednesday. Welcome back and welcome to Miles to Go with myself. And we're going to learn how to lose to gate it all. And today I have a very special guest. Her name is Brittany Dior Wilson. And for the sake of our discussion today, I will be Britt. She will be Brittany. And what we're going to talk about is the Great Unraveling. And what I mean by that is, are we holding our breath right now? I know I am. I know most of us are. Take a deep breath in and out. And you see how that little bit of surrender has changed your life, giving you a little bit of moment of pause so you can think clearly. And what we're going to do is talk to Brittany, a breathwork healer, about the power of the breath and how it supports surrender. So let's get started. So I'd like to say welcome, Brittany. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. So, Brittany, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my full name is Brittany Dior Wilson. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am currently based in Seattle, and I've been here for about a year and a half now, going on 2 years. I'm originally from Los Angeles, California, and I am a breathwork healer, as Britt said earlier. And I've been doing this work for I guess 3 years now, but it feels like a lifelong journey to doing this work because
Mm-hmm.
really it goes back way beyond that. So that's a little bit about myself, and I'm excited to be here today.
Well, great. Thank you for that little bit. And we'll get into the great unraveling as you described it in a little bit. But before we get there, tell us about your socials, your website. Where can folks find you?
Yeah, so on Instagram, my handle is at Brittwill, BRITTWIL. My website is BrittanyDiorWilson.com. And those are pretty much the only socials that I use. So I don't really use Facebook or anything else, but you can find me there. And that's where I keep all of my events and workshops updated.
Perfect, perfect. Do you have any upcoming workshops or events?
I'm on a little bit of a break right now. As June has been so busy and there's just been so much going on both in my practice and also just in like the wider collective. And I had 2 workshops in June. So I'm taking a little bit of time off now to just kind of recenter and recalibrate myself.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll have workshops probably coming up either later this month or in August. But I'm kind of just like playing things by ear and based on how I feel and what I feel called to bring forward. So not offering anything right now, but I will. But I have recordings of previous workshops on my website if folks feel interested and want to do some breath work.
All right. Well, thank you for that. So, you got the information about her socials and her website, and we'll be talking about that throughout the hour. So, go check her out. I found her through another colleague that you'll be meeting in an upcoming episode, and her Instagram is great and fabulous, and she has beautiful photography. And I'm assuming you do that yourself, but go check her out definitely. So, with that, I'm going to take another breath. Let's talk, Brittany, about how you came to breathwork. And kind of to tee this up, it seems like we had very similar comings to the path of awakening,
Yes.
um, about a year apart. So, if you folks remember from the first episode, we talked about how my life was a tower card, if you're familiar with the tarot, of everything fell apart in every part of my life, and that's how I got to surrender. And Brittany has something similar to that as well. So, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you to discuss your unraveling.
Yes. This great unraveling. Yeah, so I guess I'll start back in 2017, which is the year that I came to breathwork.
Mhm.
But I guess for further context, before that, I think most folks in the healing and wellness space kind of come to these different practices out of their own need to find
Mhm.
some kind of healing for themselves. And it's funny when people ask me how I got into breathwork, I honestly kind of just fell into it by accident, but I'll get there in a
Mhm.
minute. So um, prior to starting breath work, I had gone through years and years of therapy and reading self-help books, of going to the retreats, trying yoga, trying Reiki, all of these different things. And these are all really great modalities. But with breathwork, it just kind of struck a chord really deep within me. And I tried it once from Erin Telford, who is someone on a breathworker on Instagram who posts a lot of just videos and how to try breath work. And so I just tried like a quick, like 6 or 7 minute breath work, like YouTube video. And
Mhm.
then after that, it just kind of like spiraled into this huge thing where I feel like I divide my life as like before breath work and then after. Uh,
Wow.
but yeah, so I think, um, and so after that, Erin ended up coming down to LA to do a training, which I thought was just like a weekend retreat, but I ended up signing up for this breathwork training. So it was like a teacher training. But I say all this to say this great unraveling kind of happened after I started really diving into this breath work. And when I started breath work, it was like, oh my gosh, like I found this new thing. It feels unlike any other healing modality that I'd ever tried before. And it just kind of touched me on a really deep level. And then 6 months later, I feel like my life just kind of like fell apart and went to shit. And I think that says something about kind of what breath work does is it is one of those practices that really stirs shit up. And, I love that quote that if you go digging, you're going to find something.
Mhm.
And that's exactly what happened because after I started doing breath work, a lot of these really deep existential questions started coming up for me in a lot of different ways of my life. And I was in this period where I was in grad school and in between jobs and in between careers. And so a lot of questions started coming up for me just about what my purpose was, why I felt the need to participate in these systems and spaces that didn't really feel good and didn't really feel authentic. And so when a lot of those questions come up, it kind of gives you this really it holds up a big mirror for me at least, and like what am I doing, like why am I here,
Mm.
what is the purpose of all of this?
Mhm.
So kind of like a quarter life crisis in a lot of different ways. But
I
yeah,
I
it
had one of
was
those.
literally like the tower card for me, where like my life just kind of felt like it was burning down, and all of these like constructs that I had built on this really unstable foundation was just kind of falling from underneath me. And it kind of propelled me into this place where I picked up my life and moved and left behind a lot of these relationships and jobs and things that just were no longer serving me behind. So yeah, that's kind of my story in brief, but
It's fine. I mean, you had a quarter life crisis. I think I had my midlife crisis. So we're about 20 some odd years apart. But it
Mhm.
was very, very similar. And it sounds as if, you know, having lost everything, you found everything, right? I loved your expression of, it was a dig, right? It was an archaeological dig where you were able to go deep and find the things that you need to look for.
Mhm.
So, with that, I'm going to put that part of our story on pause because it's about time for us to go to a break. So, we will be coming back in another minute or so. We are sitting with Brittany Dior Wilson. She is a breathwork healer. We are talking about the great unraveling, about how the breath, our life force, supports us in surrender and changing our lives. And so, with that, we'll see you in a little bit on the other side of the break. Hey everyone, welcome back. You're here with me, Brittany Miles, on Miles to Go with Brittany Miles, How to Lose to Gain It All. I have a very special guest today. Her name is Brittany Dior Wilson. She is a breathwork healer, and she's an amazing healer here in Seattle. And Brittany, tell us your socials, your website, anything else?
Yeah. So Instagram, my handle is at BrittWill. So it's BrittWil. And then my website is BrittanyDiorWilson.com.
All right, cool. So, if you are just joining us, in the last segment, we were getting acquainted with Brittany, and she had a very similar life crisis tower moment that I did in 2016, but hers was in 2017. And we were talking about it. Hers is a quarter life, mine was a midlife, but still, the universe will get you wherever you are. And she had a very similar, yes, a very similar experience. And we were just talking about that. And we were last speaking about, the power of the breath and how that helped her and how she found that and how that supported her healing and her sense of surrender. And the key thought that I took out of that is that, it helped one to dig. It helped one to find the places that needed the healing and needed the help. And in this segment, we wanted to kind of follow up with that and talk about the power of the breath. And with that, Brittany, I mean, as a healer, what is the power of the breath in the body?
Oh, yeah. I love this question. I mean, the breath it is everything. I mean, we're born with our bodies in the breath. That's it. That's how we come
Mm,
into our lives, earthside. And I think there's something so special about breath work. I mean, in the wellness space, I feel like there are so many teachings and practices, but I think there's something really to be said about just connecting to something that we already have. Like we come here knowing how to breathe. It's the first thing we do. Is let
mm.
out that big yell, right? And so um, I think with breath work, it's literally like a peeling back of an onion. It's just like there's so many layers and layers and layers of conditioning of these thoughts that we've been telling ourselves since we're children. And so with breath work, it has this really special power to dig into all of these conditionings and things that we've learned in our prospective environments, and just give us the opportunity to hold up a mirror and look deeply at those things. And that's something that I found it with breathwork that I wasn't really able to find in other practices. Um, and it I love it because it truly is a self-healing tool in every
Mhm,
aspect of that phrase. And um, I love that it empowers folks to take their healing into their own hands. And,
mm.
you don't need anyone else to breathe for you. It can be helpful to have someone there with you, but truly you're doing all of the work yourself. And I find that so empowering and so liberating that to know that our healing and our freedom is in our hands.
And I love that you say that because that's what I talk about. I think in kind of my signature lesson that I have is the life you save is your own.
Hmm.
And your life is in your hands. The
Hmm.
only person that can save you is you. And that's something that I learned in my awakening was that I was waiting for people to help me. I was waiting for family, I was waiting for friends. I wanted someone to be that savior, to come in, you know, princess in distress, princess down. You've
Writing
got
this down.
someone coming on a horse or a Lexus, what have you, just to come and help me.
Yeah.
And the only person that can help me is me. And I learned that, and then I promptly forgot it, right? After I got the first wave of healing out, right? And then when I was put in other and I'm just thinking this through now and just getting these aha moments. I feel like
Mhm.
kind of this is like an Oprah thing. Oh, I got it.
Yeah.
Um, of where in the rest of my life, right? I would be like, well, why isn't someone doing something? Like again, why isn't someone helping me? And the person I can help myself. It's me,
Mhm.
right? It's something I'm consistently trying to instill in my 12-year-old, right? That the because I never learned it, my mother came from a much different generation than the one that I grew up in, right? That's when it took a very big deviation, right? Where people were like, no, I'm not going to do what you tell me to do.
Yeah.
Um, but it's enabling yourself and empowering yourself to have your own healing because again, like we talked about, like we tried Reiki, we tried yoga, I taught Pilates, I was a massage therapist, right? I did all the thing retreats and the books and all of that, but and they always say it's you, but you never believe that because you're going to the other.
Hmm. Absolutely. I mean, you literally hit the nail on the head, right? It's like, and I
Mm,
think part of it is, the way our culture is set up in a lot of ways is to constantly seek out wisdom externally, right?
mhm.
Forget how much wisdom we hold in our bodies throughout our life experiences. And we're so quick to give away our power um,
Yes.
in
Yes.
in exchange for someone else's idea. And it's like I saw this interview with Will Smith a few years ago, and it's like only you know your life, only you know yourself in such deep and intimate ways, and no one there are some questions that no one else will ever be able to answer for you better than you can, right? And so when we're so quick to give away our power, especially, in spaces like healing, it can be really empowering to take that power back and say, I have the wisdom that I need, I have the answers that I need. And it is a daily practice, it's like, it's something that I don't think we ever are, wake up one day and we're like, yeah, I have it like every single day. It's like this constant expanding and contracting and repeating, so I think that that's something really important, and something that breathwork kind of reinforces is that you have the power internally to heal yourself.
Right. Exactly. I mean, in every moment with every breath.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think that leads to my next question is like, how do we use the breath best? Right. I mean, it's something that we have, it's our own modality, but how do we use it best?
Hmm. I mean, there's so many ways to use the breath, I think. You can use it to be present, you can use it to be calm, you can use it to be excited, you can use it to stir up emotion. I mean, there's so many different ways to use the breath, but in terms of our healing, I think the the most powerful thing that the breath offers us is this sense of ultimate presence, right, with ourselves.
Hmm.
And because you always see these quotes, it's like all of our power is in the present, and every one step at a time, and all of these quotes, but really the best measurement of that is just to take things breath by breath, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's really all we have in every moment. And I think forcing ourselves to be present with our breath is one of the most difficult things we can do, um, especially in a culture where, in a time where things move so quickly.
Hmm.
It's really empowering to come back to the breath, and just be with ourselves in those moments.
And I agree with you, right? I call myself the accidental Buddhist, right? Where coming to that, it's that you're in the breath, right?
Mhm.
And that's the point of power.
Yeah.
But the next thing after that is the quiet, the stillness,
Hmm.
right? Which you can use to your advantage or to your disadvantage. For many, they use it to their disadvantage because that's where the anxiety will kick in.
Hmm.
So, one thing I want to talk about coming up in the next segment is like what comes up for folks when, the, yeah, I'm trying to say this. It's like what comes up in that stillness, right? How do we manage that stillness? How do we manage the anxiety versus the excitement or the peace? And how can we maintain that, right?
Hmm.
To, I know for at that point, that could be a meditation, right? or it could just be, I just need a break, just a moment. But we'll get to that in our next segment. So we're here with Brittany Dior Wilson. She's a breathwork healer here in Seattle. And we are talking about the Great Unraveling, about how Brittany came to become a breathwork healer and the power of breath to empower us in our own healing. And it's our life force and it's our healing force. So stay tuned. We will be right back. Hey everybody, it's Brittany Miles and welcome back to Miles to Go with Brittany Miles, how to lose to gain it all. And we are here with the lovely Brittany Dior Wilson, a breathwork healer here in Seattle. And we have been had a really great discussion about the power of the breath as a healing source and as a life force and how it supports surrender. So Brittany, tell the folks, where can they find you?
Yeah, so on Instagram, my handle is at Brittwill. That's BRITTWIL. And then my website is BrittanyDiorWilson.com.
Awesome. Thank you. She's an amazing healer here. She's got some courses on her website and other fun stuff for you to look at. And I highly encourage you to check her out. So, in the last segment, we were still talking about the power of the breath and how the breath is how you can save your own life. You're your own savior, and it's moment by moment where you can find that peace and serenity. And what we want to follow up with Brittany is that once we have the breath, we have that moment of peace, and then we have that next second of stillness. We have a choice of continuing on with that peace, or we could potentially sabotage ourselves with anxiety. So, how do folks stay present to that stillness, Brittany?
Yeah, so like I said before, breath work is one of those things, it's a shit stirrer, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those practices that will absolutely hold up a mirror to ourselves and force us to look at these shadows and these things about ourselves that may not be very pretty. And that was my first experience with it in the first year that I did this practice. And that is exactly what led to the great unraveling that we've been referring to.
Mm-hmm.
But with the breath work, I mean, you can do it from anywhere from 6 to 7 minutes to 40 minutes. And something that I love about the practice is that you can stop at any time. So, if there ever gets a point where you're feeling like debilitating anxiety, just stop. That's never happened for me, but I totally understand that it can happen for other people. But um, I think one of the most important things that breath work does is it really builds and deepens levels of self intimacy and self knowledge, right? So, um, with the breath work, you absolutely get to points where you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. Whatever's coming up, like, I really want to stop. And so, when that happens for people, I encourage them to just take a pause, take a deep breath, and then get back into the breath, because oftentimes when we hit those big moments of resistance, right on the other side of that is the sweet spot, right? When
That
you have those feelings of like euphoria, frankly, where it's just like this really deep level of intimacy and seeing yourself in ways that you can't frankly see otherwise, in my
mm,
experience. So um, that's something that I really love and appreciate about breathwork, is just that it's given me this deep level of self-knowledge and self-intimacy that's evolving, constantly evolving, right? With every layer that gets peeled back with breathwork. So
mm, I
yeah.
love that. So that's kind of as a segue into my next question. Can you talk me and the audience through, like, what's the anatomy, if you will, of a
Mm.
session with you?
Yeah. So, community based healing is something that's really important to me in my practice. So, when I do workshops, I really like for folks to get to know the people in the room. And I think
Mm,
in healing in general, it's really important to be witnessed and held and feel safe in community, especially for communities of color. And so I like to hold these spaces in such a way that allows for people to just really see each other and make themselves feel, just release any type of shame or anything that might be coming up for them, and just have them know that other people are going through it as well and that they're not
Mhm.
alone. Also, with breathwork, especially in group settings in person, not like virtual workshops, it can feel really, really vulnerable because, and you
Mm.
wouldn't think so because you're just laying down and breathing, but going to these deep um, parts of ourselves and accessing these things that may not look so pretty in front of in a room full of strangers can be really terrifying for people. And so um, I like to start groups with just having people share like what's coming up for them, what they're working through, just see the faces in the room and just kind of create this thread connecting everyone. Um, and so typically we breathe for maybe 35 to 40 minutes. And throughout the breathing, we do these like primal yells where people will just kind of have an adult temper tantrum and stomp their feet on the ground and yell and scream and just really let everything out. And those are really important parts of the breath work because it really pushes past like a lot of resistance that comes up for people. Um, and I think it just also just taps into this space that like we as humans in these societies don't really access that often. And that's like those deep um, parts of emotions where we're feeling anger and rage and frustration and just letting all of that out, which, like I said before, can be really scary for people. So, um, having the space to do that in community is something really special, and I think just kind of connects everyone to this sense of humanity that we may not be receiving in day to day life. So
I
that's
think that's
what especially.
beautiful.
Thank you.
That's lovely, and I can only imagine, like, the power of that in person, right? Where you are, as you said, being witnessed by other people, and it's because in our culture, because of technology, and I built a lot of stuff that people use, we are isolated, right? And I think the pandemic has shown us that we're isolated, though we can use technology such as Zoom in that platform. People are still alone, especially with these
Mhm.
feelings of lack of self-love, lack of, any sort of esteem, confidence, lots of the negative emotions.
Mhm.
But being in a group where you can see it's not just you, because in our heads, in our own movie, we think it's just us,
Mhm.
right? And it's not. And that's just the nature of our Western civilization at this point in
Mhm.
time. So I think it's really great for people to have that power and have that group and have that community, especially as you're saying, there is that vulnerability, right? And that's the great thing, is that you're empowered, but being vulnerable is empowering. And that's something I'm trying to share as a message to people, because that was a great thing that I had to learn, that though everything was falling apart, it was falling together, and I didn't have to fix it.
Mhm.
I just had to experience it. And
Yeah.
that was hard. Again, being a former New Yorker and working in technology, I had to do something, constantly, like, do something. Never really worked, but I felt really good about myself and I was accomplishing something. But
Mhm.
through this process, I'm learning to slow myself down through my breath and allowing, right?
Yeah.
Vulnerability is about softening and allowing. And I think that's
Mhm.
great. And you touched a little bit on resistance. But I mean, have you ever had a client in a private or in a group session where they are just resisting everything within that's coming up, and what does that look like and how do you support that?
Yeah, I mean, any type of healing is a really personal practice, and as a facilitator, I want to help people get to those edges, but I never want
Mhm.
to be the one to push them over it, right?
Mhm.
So, um, I think one of the most important things is that people feel safe, but as a facilitator, I also have to honor that everyone is on their own journey and people will
Mhm.
do things as they feel the capacity to. right?
Mhm.
So I've had workshops where people will come in and it's their first time and they don't know what to expect and they don't know what this breath work is. Is it yoga? Is it meditation? Is it energy work? And I get that 100%. That's why I always tell people, like, if it's your first time doing breath work, come back for a second time because you have a little bit more knowledge of what exactly is going to happen, right? And that's important
Mhm.
to feel safe. But I've had workshops where people come in and they do the breath work for 5 minutes and they stop and that's all they have. And I'm like, that's fine, right? And if
Mhm.
you keep coming back, I guarantee you, maybe you'll do it for 10 minutes the next round. And maybe you'll do it for 20 minutes the next round. And it's this constant kind of chipping away because, like I said earlier, when you're peeling back these layers to things that may not have been accessed in a really long time and holding up this mirror for yourself for things that may not look very pretty and welcoming, that can be really scary, right?
Mhm.
Confronting a lot of that. And so I always encourage people to do things in their own time and in their own capacity. Um, but the most important thing to me is just that people feel safe and supported in doing that. So, yeah.
I
And
think
resistance comes up for everyone.
I love that. I love that a lot because I could just imagine folks coming in and they're like, "I'm not doing this. I can't do it." Right? Though they like their brain is, but then like their
They'll decide
body's
before
like,
they've even started that they don't want to do it, and that's totally fine. I get it because our bodies, when healing happens, like a lot of times our bodies will be like, I don't want to look at this. I don't want to
yeah.
confront this. And people will experience roadblocks, like even coming to a workshop, like hours before they'll start to feel that resistance come up. Um, and I think it's a natural response that our nervous system has, like keeping things the same and keeping things safe, right?
Yep.
Because sameness is safeness or safety. So it totally makes sense that these things come up for people. But like I said, my most important job as a facilitator is just to make people aware that that's totally normal and that whenever they're ready, this is a space that they can come to.
And I love that. And I can see that through just your body language, how you speak about it, and you're an awesome facilitator.
Thank you.
So, we're getting ready to go off to break. We're here with Brittany Dior Wilson, a breathwork healer here in Seattle. And we are talking about how the breath supports surrender. And in our next segment, we'll be talking a little bit more about healing of the breath. So, stay tuned. We'll be back shortly. Hey everyone, welcome back. You're here with Brittany Miles on Miles to Go with Brittany Miles, How to Lose to Gain It All. Today we have a very special guest. Her name is Brittany Dior Wilson, and she's a breathwork healer here in Seattle. And we're talking about the power of the breath and how that supports surrender. And Brittany, tell everyone how they can find you.
Yeah. So on Instagram, my handle is at Brittwill. That's BRITTWIL. And then my website is BrittanyDiorWilson.com.
Yes, and Brittany has various courses on her website. Right now, she's taking a bit of a break, but she's coming back with groups in late summer, correct?
Late summer. Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. So we have been spending a wonderful hour talking, again, as I said, about the power of breath and surrender. What we would like to touch on in our last segment is really how does the breath support surrender? We've talked about it as empowerment, as a point of presence. It's a way for us to save ourselves moment by moment. So, Brittany, in your work, personally and professionally, how have you seen breath support surrender?
Yeah. Surrender is something that always comes up for me in really interesting ways. And
Mm,
um, going back to what we were talking about earlier with this great unraveling, I was in this period, this dark night of the soul where I was just in so much pain and so much suffering. And I remember calling up a friend when I was going through it in like one of the hardest days. And I remember calling up my friend. I was
mm,
like, I don't know what to do. Like, I can't handle this. I don't know what's going on. And I remember what she said to me was so poignant. She was just like, just stop resisting it. Whatever's coming up for you, just stop resisting it. Just let it come up and just feel whatever it is and release that need to control or judge or fix whatever is coming up for you. And so, a lot of the things that came up for me were brought up in surface because of breath work and things that had come up for me in previous workshops. And I think with the breath, again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, it really just forces us to be present with ourselves and just to allow whatever is coming up come up. And I always preface that in my workshop, and I tell people just trust that whatever is coming up for you is ready to come up for a reason, and you can handle
Mm,
it when it does come up. And when it does come up, just breathe through it. That's your only job, is to just breathe through it. And
mhm,
so having that sense of presence and that sense of safety with our breath and with ourselves is so important with surrender, because things are always going to come up, right? Like hard time, like no matter how much healing you
mhm.
do or how many workshops or whatever, it's like things are always going to come up, and the only thing that we can do is trust that we have the capacity to get through whatever it is in the best and most graceful way that we can, right? And
Mhm.
so that's something that breathwork has taught me over the years, is that when things come up, as they inevitably will, just trust that you have the capacity to handle it.
And I think that's great because it is a lifelong journey. Because when I first came to my awakening, my tower moment, I thought, and we were talking about this in the break, it was that, oh, I thought I was done.
Mhm.
And I remember I actually had a tarot reading, and I was talking about that with the reader who I had a relationship with. And she's like, honey, you're always healing. You're
Mhm.
not done.
Yes.
And I was like, but it's been a lot of big stuff. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And you're so right about it's that onion peel, right? And that's part of the journey, right? It isn't this one-stop shop. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what ego tells us. It's like, well, I've done the thing. I can tick my
Mhm.
box. But that's not what intuition and experience and what life is teaching you,
Yeah.
is that you're here to learn something, and
Mhm.
you're also here to unlearn something.
Yep.
And that's where I feel I am in my life, is that I'm unlearning things, right? And I think that's where once it comes up and you breathe through it, you realize that you are stronger than you actually think you are.
Mhm.
And the things that you thought would break you don't.
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
that's always, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Okay. And something I also learned through this is the responding versus reacting.
Mhm.
Now, I always go back to my famous quote of Oprah's, like, people always want to do something, but what do you want to do? And
Mhm.
that is, to me, the reacting to what's in front of you versus like looking at it somewhat, you know, at a glance or somewhat critically, and you're just kind of like, okay, let me see what's actually going on here. How do you see that working with the breath, of people using the breath to respond versus react?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that breath work does is it kind of overrides the executive function of our brains, right? So when we're giving our brain something to focus on, which is the breath, it puts us in this space where we're really really connected to our body and our intuition.
Mhm.
And so when these things come up for people during breathwork workshops, it gives them the space to say, how does my body feel about what's happening? How is my gut reacting to what's happening? And it comes up in everyday life where you're able to kind of see situations a little bit more clearly and tap into the wisdom that your body is holding versus
Mhm.
just the initial reactions that our brain provides us, right? And so we touched on this earlier where, our brain's role is to keep us alive, first of
Right.
all. Like, and alive many times just looks like same, keeping things the same. And that only works to a certain extent when you are conditioned to do things and respond in a certain ways, which can be great. Like I appreciate my brain and it's wanting to keep me alive. But at the same time, like when we're looking to make changes and make shifts to things that we want and our desires, we have to kind of make some deep changes in our lives. And so when we're able to listen to the wisdom and intuition of our body, in conjunction with our brains, and look at our behavior and past ways that we've responded to things and say, well, I responded to this before like this. What would happen if I did it this way? It's just that small gap, that I think our breath allows us to connect to in order to respond versus react.
And I love that. It's that we are giving ourselves the ability to listen to our body and the wisdom of our body. As we were saying, nobody else knows you like you, right? And your body has the wisdom. You know what's best for you and what's right for you. And the breath can completely support you in that
Mm,
through your own vulnerability and allowing. And I think that's great. And
yeah.
that's, I think, part of the message that I wanted to get out today with you is that you have all of this ability, this innate knowledge within your DNA encoded. So you use it, right? You can access it at any moment in time. And that this is all a lifelong journey. And with that, I want to say thank you, Brittany. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this powerful conversation. I've loved that I've connected with you.
Yeah.
Tell the folks one more time where they can find you.
Yes. So my Instagram is at Britwill. That's BRITTWIL. And my website is BrittanyDiorWilson.com. And it's been so lovely being here with you. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you've listened to all or even a part, go check this young woman out. She's got some really great energy, and I think she's a really powerful healer. So give her some love. And with that, I would like to say thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining me today on Miles to Go with Brittany Miles, How to Lose to Gate It All. I've been enjoying this ride so far, so keep riding with me. I will see you later this month. Take care and take a deep breath of life and enjoy. Bye.